home service. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of European forces.
Greetings, Groaners! This week finds us with our D-Day special. I feel really yucky tonight, but it isn't about me. Now raise your groans as we celebrate a landmark event in our history. By the way, this isn't an episode about groaning about D-Day, just to clear that up. We have no audience groan this week, but I'm sure we'll have some next week. Your games this week are Yes or BS, Who the Hell Am I? And Gimme the Question. I'll start us off with my groans for this week, the D-Day groans. Forgetting D-Day. There are those out there who feel we should forget the past and not honour those who gave their lives for our freedom. Why? Because it apparently has an impact on those who are taught history. No, we shouldn't ever take freedom for granted and always remember the actions and those who gave us our freedoms we enjoy today. Tyranny. It does seem like history taught us nothing, and I may repeat this further down the line in the show, so do bear with me. And we live in an age where if the wrong thing is said or done, then fighting seems imminent. Whatever happened to talking things out? If some leaders and or politicians can get out their own way, then we could accomplish great things. Tyranny shouldn't be a thing these days, and some smaller countries shouldn't have to live in fear. War. You know, the D-Day landings were a significant landmark in our history, but overall, war shouldn't have a place in humanity anyway. We are at that point in our evolution where we could destroy each other at the drop of a hat. War should be a thing of the past, as all it leads to is death on all sides. Nobody truly wins. Sadly, humanity never learns, and generations pay the price. Not just those who lose their lives fighting, but generations down the line are affected, either by hatred, or by malice, or by total misunderstandings. And that's those groans, kicked out for this week, but not forgotten. As stated, there is no audience groan this week, but you can contribute for future episodes by doing any one of the following. You can comment on any episode and it'll be added to the queue. You can send an email in to the groanzonepod@gmail.com. You can join us on Facebook groups under the Groan Zone podcast. You can find us on Discord to both join in live and leave content under the Groan Zone. You can find myself, that's Mr. E. Groaner, that's Mr. with an E on the end, or Nicole Amos, that's our lovely admin there, on Facebook Messenger. So your contributions are always welcome. They are, but don't forget, we need your groans. We need your YOYs. We need your 01 Luckies. We need your Hero or Zero of the Week nominations. And if you got any feedback or even possible ideas for future games or content, do let us know and it will be reviewed. Now then, let's test your knowledge with D-Day Yes or BS. Round 1. The D in day doesn't stand for anything significant. B. The D-Day invasion was originally supposed to be 7th of June 1944, but was brought forward when plans were discovered. Or C. The D-Day landings involved UK, USA and Canadian troops only. Those going to playing along live, shoot your answers in. Those who aren't playing live, here's where you pause, have a think, then you answer and you unpause. Okay, we have a few people who have dropped down B's, a couple of A's and C's. We have a spread again across the board. Moving on, Groaners. Round number 2. Option A. Some of the structures that the Nazi forces built to fight against the D-Day landings are still standing in Normandy to this day. B. The Nazi forces thought the Allies would land elsewhere as Normandy was one of the furthest crossing points and also there wasn't a port. Or C. The D-Day landing employed the use of rarely used specialist equipment to enable troops to land at Normandy. Same again, Groaners. Fire them off now. Or pause and unpause. Bees flying in. All we've got's bees. Bee, 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 bee. Bee everywhere on this one. I hear you, Groaners. I hear you. And round number 3. Option A. The first step in the invasion was the landing itself by water. B. President Eisenhower was the current president at the time of the D-Day landings. Or C. As of 2024, the oldest surviving soldier who took part in D-Day is 109 years old. Same again, Groaners, for the final time this week. Press pause, answer unpause, or answer live. And we have another full one, C's, all over the place. We shall find out later on if you scored points, Groaners. And now, I smell a D-Day 01 Lucky. You're probably wondering, how can we have an 01 Lucky on D-Day? But hear me out. D-Day was the largest seaborne invasion in military history and was planned to initiate the taking back of Nazi-occupied areas. This Allied offensive meant the writing was on the wall for the Nazis and started what we would call a downward spiral for the Axis forces until their defeat in September 1945. So this week's 01 Lucky goes to those Axis forces who fought blindly for a tyrant which only led to their inevitable defeat. A victory for freedom. We switch it up now to Admin Nicole's Creepy Corner, featuring a specially episode-written story. This week's story is called The Things We Fight For. When you grow up in war, you quickly forget whatever came before it. I was merely a child during the war, so I grew up with it. You quickly learn what to do. The war may be different now, but the fighting is the same. The struggles are the same. I remember a name, Edna May, a woman who was never against the struggle. Times were harsh, but she never gave up. She was a land girl for a pretty small farm with around 4 others. They had become a real family and a real help. The farm owner was getting old and couldn't be more grateful for the help. Doris Carp was her best friend, but they were all inseparable. The two often went together when it came time to catch the rats. No point in growing all those crops as the rats keep taking them, after all. Not to mention the risk of disease they can bring in with them. Not far up the road, maybe a few miles, were the lumberjills, in charge of all the wood needed for telegraph poles or other things. I wish I had seen them for myself, but I barely left the farm and couldn't go watch them. Edna and the others spent their days in so much hard work, yet never once did you see them stop smiling. They were doing all they could to help after all. Edna was going through her own struggles too. Her fiancé was there in Omar. He was one of the soldiers on that beach. He had proposed right before he had to leave, and Edna could only wish a safe return. She couldn't tell him that she was pregnant. She couldn't risk that distraction for him. Instead, she would work hard on the farm and wait and pray for his safe return. Of course, that isn't to say the land girls were without risk or danger. There used to be more land girls on the farm. Some died from disease, so I never met them. And Linda now spends her days in the barn after an accident when she was fixing a tractor which went horribly wrong and she lost her leg. She never gave up fighting though. She took charge of caring for the animals so she could still do her part. She even taught me how to make butter from scratch. It was hard at first, but I loved how everyone was always together, no matter where we all came from. They all stuck together even after Edna started to show, and the farm owner was really nice too. Their days were filled with farming and milking the cows and catching rats from time to time. It was hard work, especially in the beating sun, but they never gave up. The sounds of sirens and potential dangers, and they didn't even flinch. They just knew what to do, and they got on with it. It'd be wrong to say they weren't scared. They were terrified all the time. They had each other though, and that was enough. All 4 of those girls had lost their families already, so all they truly had was each other and Edna's baby. After D-Day, Edna got a telegram to say her fiancé was killed on that beach. She was so distraught that she cried non-stop for days until Mary, another one of the girls, called her downstairs. One of the soldiers that fought with her fiancé was there. He was bleeding and missing an arm, but Edna wasted no time. She dried her tears and got to work, organising the girls to help mend that man and get him the help he needed. He explained what truly happened, something that only men that were there could tell her. Edna deserved to know what happened to her fiancé Wilson. The 4 men, including the fiancé, were caught in an ambush. Guns all pointed to them, and they knew if they tried to run, they would die. They were all badly injured, and Wilson knew they would never survive being prisoners of war. Down at their feet, between them and the enemy, was a mine, barely visible from the ground, but no doubt active. Something only Wilson spotted, so, as he and his team prepared to surrender and either die or become prisoners of war, he whispered to his team to prepare to run. The rocks not far away would shield his friends, so he counted down as he got to 1. The guns raised and his friends ran to the rocks as fast as they could, while he ran to the mine. They only realised as they reached those rocks that the enemy wasn't shooting. It was a fraction of a second as they saw Wilson turn to them, and in his final breath, he told them to live before that mine exploded, wiping out the enemy around them. His team was hit by the blast, but their injuries were minimal, especially compared to the injuries they already had. Wilson died a true hero, and his team vowed to make sure everyone knew what he did. Many didn't believe them, since they were the only ones to know, but Edna never gave up proving his legacy to as many as she could. My father was Wilson, and he was a hero, and my mother Edna never stopped telling me the story. She spent her whole life making sure my father got the recognition he deserved. I got to grow up on that farm with Mum and the other land girls, occasionally sneaking off to see the lumberjills in action. Life slowly formed a new normal, with the war finally over, but help was still needed everywhere. Dad's name was eventually added to the memorial. His friends were there when it was added. For the first time, it felt like it was finally all over. We had finally won. Now everyone will know my father's legacy and all that everyone has done in Omar. They will never be forgotten. We'll always fight to keep their memories with us. My mother and all her friends ride together with my father's team to get his story told and get him what he deserved. Now I too will fight for every hero that died to make sure everyone's story gets told. No one will be left behind again. You know, I read that story when it was sent to me by Admin Nicole, and I nearly wept, and I nearly broke reading this story. The characters may be fictional, but this story is very real for a lot of people who lost their partners on that beach. It's very, very real. But somberly, we move on to why oh why. History repeating itself. I find myself wondering, over the course of life, if humans are on course to doom themselves. We are like addicted to pretty much punching ourselves in the face and bullying each other country by country. Has history truly taught us nothing? Humans never learn from errors in the past. I just have to ask, why oh why? Now we've asked the why, but I have the answers in the next game. But do any of you, dear groaners, have the right question? Yep, you know what time it is. It's time for D-Day Gimme the Question. Round 1. Your answer is General Bernard Montgomery. Your questions are: A. Who commanded all the land forces during D-Day? B. Who was the Supreme Commander during D-Day? Or C. Which general died on the beaches of Normandy near the end of the invasion? Fire them off, groaners. Give me the answers. You're playing after the fact. You pause, answer, unpause. We've got a split. A's and B's. Okay, groaners. I hear you loud and clear on that one. Moving on. We headed up to round number 2. Your answer is General Dwight Eisenhower. Your questions are: A. Which US general was strongly against the landings? B. Who was the US general who was the Supreme Commander during D-Day? Or C. Which US general ran for president but was unsuccessful? See him again, groaners. Give me them live. If not, give me them after. We have a flurry of B's coming in there. Okay. Here we go. Any more? Nope. Round number 3 coming at you, groaners. Your answer is Charles de Gaulle. Your questions are: Option A. Who was the commander of the French resistance who led attacks behind enemy lines to halt supplies run up to the D-Day landings? B. Who was the first soldier to make it up to the Nazi machine gun turrets and detonate an explosive which took one of them out of commission? Or C. Who led the French troops during the year of the D-Day landings? Go again, Groaners. Here we go. Oh, we've all gone for C's. Okay, fairly even this one, Groaners. Okay. No problem there. Excellent. Any more before we move on? Okay. Your answers for the games will come around later, but now we have a hero for all time, not just for the week. His name was Waverley Woodson, and he was 21 years old during the D-Day event. He was part of the only black combat unit to land on D-Day. He arrived sometime around 10 AM on Omar Beach, but not where he should have been since his landing craft hit a mine in the water as it neared the beach. This was 3 hours after the US troops landed. There was a lot of injured around him and some drowning, but as the only medic around, he set up a first aid station. On that sandy, rocky beach, he worked tirelessly, treating the wounded for 30 hours, while trying to treat his own wounds at the same time. For 30 continuous hours, while under enemy fire, he treated 200 casualties. The news of what he had done reached the White House, and he was to receive a Congressional Medal of Honor, an award so valued that the president gives it out himself, as he had done to white people before him. His story forgotten by all but his family. Woodson never got his medal. His bravery and heroics became a casualty of racism and wartime bureaucracy. As the 80th anniversary of D-Day is here, he will still not get his medal. However, he will get the Distinguished Silver Cross, the nation's second highest medal for combat valor, all a part of a long overdue apology for how racism suppressed awards for heroic black soldiers in World War II. We salute you, Mr. Woodson, for your service and your bravery. Now, as stated earlier, we'll find out who scored points now and who didn't, with the game answers. D-Day yes or BS first. Round 1. If you went for option A, the D in day for D-Day doesn't stand for anything significant. This is true. Unlike V for Victory Day, the D is actually a military term for the start of a planned operation. So it would just mean Day-Day, which makes no sense. B. The D-Day landings were originally supposed to be the 7th of June 1944, but were brought forward when plans were discovered. This is entirely false. It was supposed to be the 5th of June 1944, but was pushed back by 1 day due to bad weather. C. If you went for this one, the D-Day landings only involved UK, USA and Canadian troops only. That's entirely false. It also involved the following troops from Australia, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, France, Greece, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, among others. Round 2. If you went for A, some of the structures that the Nazi forces built to fight against the D-Day landings are still standing in Normandy to this day. This is entirely true. They include concrete turret defences, anti-landing obstacles and more. If you went for option B, the Nazi forces thought the Allies would land elsewhere as Normandy was one of the furthest crossing points and also there was no port. This is entirely true again. They genuinely thought it would be the least likely place for an Allied invasion. Or C, you went for this one, the D-Day landing employed the use of rarely used specialist equipment to enable troops to land at Normandy. This is false. There wasn't any specialist equipment, so it had to be invented so the landings could take place, which includes the boats the troops were in to take them from one area to the other one. They weren't a thing before the landings. Round 3. If you went for option A, the first step in the invasion was the landing itself by water, you're wrong. The first part of the operation was conducted by air with the paratroopers. If you went for option B, President Eisenhower was the current president at the time of the D-Day landings, that's false. It was actually President Roosevelt. If you went for C though, as of 2024 the oldest surviving soldier who took part in D-Day is 109 years old, yes, he is and he's still alive. And he is so honourable, he stated recently in an interview that he wants no fuss or medals. Thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you very, very much. From one generation to another one. And lastly, well not lastly, I'll correct myself there, give me the question. Round 1. Your answer was General Bernard Montgomery. Your correct question was A. Who commanded all the land forces during D-Day? That's actually correct. He was a British general and commanded around 160,000 men. Round 2. Your answer was General Dwight Eisenhower. Your correct question was B. Who was the US general who was the supreme commander during D-Day? He oversaw all land, sea and air units involved. And last round, round 3, your answer was Charles de Gaulle. Your correct question was, indeed it was C. Who led the French troops during the year of the D-Day landings? He was in control of the French troops over the course of the entirety of World War II. And from last week, which wasn't D-Day themed at all, Admin Nicole's anagram anxiety answer. Agnes Legume Smile was your anagram. Your clue was Note Nicole's heartbreak. The answer was Gelsimum elegans, otherwise known as heartbreak grass for its toxic properties. If I butcher that answer, it'll be in the show notes. On that note, hopefully someone out there got points playing live or not playing live. If you didn't, there's always next week. And don't forget, raise a glass to those troops. But speaking of next week, I nearly forgot, here's a weekly pictorial game which you'll get the answer for next week. Yep, it's time for Who the Hell Am I? Your clue is, this Scottish comic character is famous for sitting on a bucket and kept people laughing during World War II, including when the D-Day landings occurred. That answer will come next week. And Groaners, that brings our D-Day special to a close. Apologies if any coughs or errors slipped through after editing. See you next week. Bye-bye.